What were people to do when they saw the abomination of desolation? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of Mark on Walking Through the Bible. If you have a Bible with you, you can turn to Mark chapter 13. We're going to be reading from verses 14 to 23. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So, Mark chapter 13, beginning at verse 14. So when you see the abomination of desolation, spoken of by Daniel the prophet, standing where it ought not, let the reader understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let him who is on the housetop not go down into the house, nor enter to take anything out of his house. And let him who is in the field not go back to get his clothes. But woe to those who are pregnant, and to those who are nursing babies in those days. And pray that your flight may not be in winter. For in those days there will be tribulation, such as has not been since the beginning of the creation, which God created until this time, nor ever shall be. And unless the Lord had shortened those days, no flesh would be saved. But for the elect's sake, whom he chose, he shortened the days. Then if anyone says to you, look, here is the Christ, or look, here is there, do not believe it. For false Christs and false prophets will rise and show signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. But take heed, see, I have told you all things beforehand. In this chapter, we're discussing the answer to two questions posed by the disciples. When would the temple be destroyed, and what signs would accompany them? An unnoted question by Mark, but one we know from later on in the chapter was asked, was what would be the signs accompanying Jesus' second coming? We've thus far completed one episode in this chapter with one more to come following this one. So we invite you to go to eastendchurch.org and search under the Media/WTTB English Podcast tab to listen to the entire chapter before asking questions or leaving comments. In verses 5 to 13, Jesus gave them things that would not be signs of the destruction of Jerusalem: wars, rumors of wars, pestilences, and famines. These would be the beginning of sorrows for the disciples, for they would face them, but they wouldn't be signs about the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem. In fact, this destruction would only occur after the gospel was preached to the whole world. It hadn't been preached yet when Jesus spoke those words, but Colossians 1:23 says that it had by about 62 AD, so following that, the temple could be destroyed. So the gospel being preached to the whole world opened the door to the destruction of the temple, but in and of itself was not a sign that it was near. In fact, when Paul made that statement in Colossians 1, it would still be yet another 8 years before the temple was destroyed. What would be that sign? The abomination of desolation standing in the holy place spoken of by Daniel the prophet. This prophecy is spoken of in Daniel 9:27 and Daniel 11:31. Let's thus read Daniel 9:27. Then he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week, but in the middle of the week he shall bring an end to sacrifice and offering, and on the wing of abominations shall be one who makes desolate, even unto the consummation which is determined is poured out on the desolate. Daniel 11:31 says, and forces shall be mustered by him, and they shall defile the sanctuary fortress. Then they shall take away the daily sacrifices and place there the abomination of desolation. When Daniel spoke those words, who he was referring to is a mystery, but those reading the prophecy would know it when they see it. For the Jews, there would be no mistaking what Daniel was talking about. The temple would be defiled if someone who was a heathen entered into it. Paul was falsely accused of defiling the temple by bringing a Gentile into it in Acts 21:28 and was almost killed for it. The abomination of desolation was much larger in scope, and from history we know it to represent the Roman army that surrounded Jerusalem and then destroyed it, including the temple in 70 AD. What were believers to do when they saw the abomination of desolation? If they were in Judea, they were to flee to the mountains. They weren't to bring their possessions if they were at home, or go back for a change of clothes if they were in the field. They were to pray that this wouldn't happen when they were pregnant or nursing, for this would slow them down. They were also to pray that it wouldn't occur in the winter or on the Sabbath, for again, it would slow them down. This is referred to as a great tribulation. It doesn't refer to some rapture of the church. It refers to the destruction of Jerusalem, and if God would have let it go on indefinitely, nobody, including God's elect, Christians, would have survived. But God didn't allow this destruction to go on forever. He did shorten it for the elect's sake, and thus not everybody in the region was killed. Jesus also said that false Christs and prophets would arise during this time, telling them to go here or there. They were not to believe them, for they would lead them to death. They might even claim to show signs and wonders to prove that they were of God. They were not to believe them, for Jesus had given them warnings about this. They were not to be deceived, but were to obey Jesus. We'll conclude this chapter, the Lord willing, in the next episode. With that, our time is up today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Mark chapter 13, verses 24 to 37, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.